The title of today's show is Surrogacy Unfiltered, and life coach Alysia Lyons shares the emotional highs, unexpected challenges, and life changing lessons from her journeys in creating little miracles, a guide to surrogacy. It's her new book, which I wrote the foreword for. Whether you're curious about surrogacy or the deeper meaning behind it, this conversation will change the way you see the process. Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. I'm so delighted to have Alysia Lyons on today. Welcome, Alysia.
Thank you, Dr. Amy.
I'd like to share more about Alysia. She's a master neurotransformational results coach, author, Reiki master, and tarot reader dedicated to helping women navigate life changes, release emotional overwhelm, and reconnect with their true selves. As a four-time surrogate, she was inspired to write her book, Creating Little Miracles, A Guide to Surrogacy, to share her experiences and offer guidance to others considering this path. Blending practical coaching techniques with spiritual insights, she empowers her clients to cultivate emotional balance, strengthen relationships, and embrace personal growth. When she's not coaching or writing, she enjoys time with her fiance, son, and two dogs, living a life rooted in gratitude and purpose. Welcome again, Alysia.
Thank you so much for having me and again for writing the forward.
Of course. Your journey as a surrogate spans multiple families and experiences. What first inspired you to become a surrogate, and how did that motivation evolve over time?
It's funny because a girlfriend of mine and I in high school were having conversations about becoming moms, and we had heard a rumor that the worse that your period cramps are, the worst labor pain is. And hers was so bad that she would sometimes stay home from school, just curled up in a ball on the floor in the bathroom. She said, I want to be a mom, but I don't want to experience childbirth. And I was like, I don't want to be a mom, but I want to experience pregnancy. So I'll have a baby for you. And that was literally before I even knew there was a thing called surrogacy. So fast forward 10 years, I met a surrogate in the flesh, and she was my massage client at the time. And when she said she was a surrogate, I just picked her brain and asked all the questions, probably a lot of the ones that are in the book. And I just wanted to know everything that there was to know about surrogacy. And so when I went home all excited to tell my then husband about it, and he was like, "Absolutely not. You cannot do that." And I was like, "Oh, okay." Fast forward another several years, and after I had my son and his dad and I split, we split in May. I found an ad about surrogacy in June. I met with the agency and was matched with a family in July, and I was starting meds in August and pregnant by September. So it all went very fast. And at that time, the motivation, besides always having wanted to do it, the motivation was I needed to supplement my income and jumped in to pay some bills, but to honestly be part of this amazing journey. And then as that relationship wasn't quite what I thought it would be, I wanted to do it again and again and again.
Can I touch on that? You brought that up, and I'd love for you to just share with me what you mean by that. Like the relationship wasn't quite what you thought it would be. What does that mean?
So there was a language barrier between me and the parents. The mom wasn't really communicative at all. So I always communicated with the dad. And I used Google Translate to translate into Spanish as they were a couple from Spain. And there were some circumstances when it was time to deliver the baby a couple weeks earlier than what he was expecting because for whatever reason he thought, oh, the due date is this day, so we're gonna be there on that day to pick up the baby. And their baby came 2 weeks early. I ended up going home from the hospital because I was anxious to get back to my son, and they never called me or the agency to let them know that they were here or to let me know or to say goodbye to the baby. So it was just this abrupt stop that I wasn't expecting, and that the owner of the agency had said that I've never experienced this in my X number of years as owning the agency or being involved in surrogacy, and it was not something that I was prepared for. and there was a grieving process. Still to this day, don't know what her name was.
So, knowing that experience that you had and then all the experiences since then, how do we prevent something like this from happening to another surrogate?
What I believe is that part of the problem was that I didn't know what kind of relationship that I wanted with the family because I was just jumping in and I was motivated by the money. I was excited that we got going so fast. I was afraid to say this isn't a match because I was afraid that I wouldn't get matched again, which is silly because there's way more people who want babies than people who are willing to be surrogates. I think the ratio is a little bit off. But I had the scarcity mindset of I better say yes to whatever's presented to me. So I think that is something that would have changed the situation a lot had I thought, "Oh, this really just isn't a fit." That's not how it worked out. What I recommend in the book is understand what your motivation is, which my motivation at the time was to be paid, and I was, and that was the end. Understanding what your motivation is. If you want to have this relationship with the family after the fact, then that's something that you should be honest and upfront about to begin with. And my desire became more clear as I went on of what I really wanted is I really do want to have updates on the baby and a relationship and kind of be Aunt Alicia. And I like that idea and I love relationships. So I think that was something that I wasn't aware of at the time that the relationship was going to be really important to me.
So, you've learned a lot about setting expectations for those relationships. So, is there a way that surrogates should share that with their agency and then also with the family? Should it be in the legal contract? What have you learned about how to set those expectations up front?
I think a lot of agencies actually do a really good job of trying to help you understand what your desire was, but I was in that lack mindset. So I was just like, yes to whatever. Like, I'm fine with no communication. I'm fine with communication for a year. I'm fine with long term. For each pregnancy, I got a better and better relationship. After the second baby was born, the mom gave me updates for a year, which was in the contract that I would get those updates for a year. And then no communication after that. And I thought, at least a goodbye letter would be nice. And the next time that I was matched, I started saying, whatever the relationship that you want is fine. My request is that if we do have a year and a goodbye, then I would like a goodbye email. And if you want a long ongoing relationship up front, but then something changes, just have a conversation with me about it. And I'm fine when I'm aware of what the situation's going to be. It's the blindsided, the ghosting that hurts.
And I hear that so much from surrogates that they get ghosted and it really hurts. I mean, I get it. You have a newborn at home, you're new parents, or you're bringing a new baby into the family, but completely ghosting the human being that's responsible for your family seems really cruel. Some surrogates are okay with it, but I think 9 out of 10 would probably say, yeah, I agree. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. So, those are really good tips. You also mentioned the cultural differences that you had with the first family, the language barrier, and that influenced your communication with them. And you shared how you navigated that challenge. What advice would you give to future surrogates working with international families?
I think that as technology has evolved, because this was like 2013, Google Translate was just a thing happening. Now on our phones, we can have a live translation of I'll speak English and it'll translate it into Spanish back, and then they speak Spanish and translate it back to English to me. So I think that as technology has evolved, that's not going to be as much of a problem. I think with this couple, there was just a wall up that they were interested in paying for the transaction, and that was really all that they were interested in. I think that again, but going back to that communication and making sure that we're all on the same page as far as what we want, that'll be avoided. And most of the time there is an initial conversation with you and the intended parents. And so trust your gut with what you're feeling in that initial conversation. If it's not a fit, then know that there are other parents that you can have the kind of relationship that you're looking for.
Exactly. So keep waiting for that perfect match before you confirm it. And surrogacy is such a deeply emotional experience because you're talking about carrying a baby, and there's pregnancy hormones and then there's postpartum hormones. Were there moments where you struggle with attachment or detachment? And how did you manage those emotions?
I think with the first family, because there was this like, I was expecting to get a goodbye that didn't come. I ended up with a cold for where I lost my voice for the next 6 weeks. And I went to this like energetic healer person, and she said, that cold is because you're sad. Your mind has made the decision that it's going to carry a baby for someone else, but your body is like, where's the baby?
Mhm.
And so it literally, I walked out of that session and my voice was back. And I'm not joking that it was gone for 6 weeks. That was an interesting situation. And then the next baby, the mom came, and again, she came after the birth, and I had gone home and she was in communication. So I was just talking myself through, okay, if I never see this baby again, it's okay. I've been through it once before. I can do it again. But she did, after 2 weeks, call me, and I got to have my hour of goodbye. And I think the most important thing that we have to remember as surrogates is that this is a journey of love and not loss. And we are connected to the parents and not the pregnancy.
But it's not as simple as that for some people. And I always talk to surrogates about, are you done with your own family first before you carry for someone else? Because it would be a lie to say that surrogacy does not impact someone's fertility. And the reason is that surrogates are getting pregnant at an age where their eggs could be still really healthy. And if you are doing this for someone else and time is passing, then potentially when you're ready to have another baby, you might have a harder time as a surrogate, or something might happen at delivery that might prevent you from having your own baby. That those things are really rare. But did you ever have a moment where you said, I really want to have another baby myself as you were doing this for others?
Not by the time that I was doing it for others. I had my son in 2012, and I never got back on birth control because my intention was to have another baby immediately. And I always joke that God knew better because we ended up splitting up when my son was 14 months. And one baby was blessing enough during that time of being single. I just knew that I was a one and done mom, but my grandma had 7 babies of her own. And I was like, her body could do it. My mom had 4. I know that I could give back. Like I said, I enjoyed being pregnant. I had some pregnancy challenges, but for the most part, I just loved it. Like I would forget that I was pregnant. I was like, why can't I do this for other people?
Yeah. The reason why I bring this question up is because so many intended parents, that's one of the first questions they ask. Is there a chance that the surrogate's going to keep my baby? And I say, no, think of them as babysitters. Like they just want to watch your baby and then leave because they have their own families. And I also like how you brought up how with your first husband, he wasn't on board. And I've seen situations where the husband will say yes to it, but isn't on board to it. And there can be conflict in the relationship. And then I've actually seen a surrogate, not through my clinic, where she got really depressed because her husband wasn't helpful at all, especially after she delivered. Have you heard of stories like that as well?
I haven't actually, and I was single for the first 2 journeys, and then my fiancé, I call him my husband all the time because 'cause we've been together for almost 10 years. He's been very supportive through my journeys. I know that there are men who have feelings about their wives or girlfriends being pregnant with someone else's baby. I don't know of anybody personally that's happened to.
And how important do you think it is for your fiance to be on board and really supportive? Do you think that he should be involved in the match calls and talking to the couple ahead of time or the single person who is the recipient?
I think that being okay with your partner being pregnant and being willing to be emotionally and sometimes physically supportive during the pregnancy is definitely important. My fiance has zero desire to be in the room, which is great because I have zero desire for him to be in the room when I'm giving birth. So we're a perfect match when it comes to that. I think that as long as both people are on board, you're gonna have more of a smooth sailing than if one person is resistant. And it's definitely something to consider before becoming a surrogate.
You mentioned like physically he had to be helpful at certain times, and there are medical and logistical challenges that are part of being a surrogate and with any pregnancy. Can you share some of the unexpected hurdles that you faced as a surrogate and how you handled them?
Well, a big one was I wasn't expecting to carry twins. Yeah, that I blame Dr. Amy. I asked her, said, "How come you don't know this before you're transferring the egg?" And you said it happens
One
literally.
embryo. Yes,
Yeah.
we transferred
Yes,
one
one embryo. Thank you.
embryo. Yeah.
You said it happens literally like days after the transfer. So that was a big surprise. And I was fortunate that my fiance was very supportive through my whining because I whined a lot in the first trimester. And then for unforeseen circumstances, I got put on bed rest because somebody rear ended me while I was pregnant. And I went to the hospital just to get checked out and I didn't leave for 5 days. So that was a big hurdle. And I was truly grateful and 100% blessed that my fiance was willing to take my son to and from school because that's something that I do normally. And I had a huge support system that his mom is really supportive. And I think that without a support system, this is a much more difficult journey than with a support system.
Yes, I have intended parents that send me their list of preferences, I should say, for surrogates. And one of them is to be partnered. And if they're not partnered, I think to your point, you have to have a really strong support system as a surrogate to get through some of these unexpected challenges that can come up. I don't want to dwell on being ghosted too much, but it is an experience that I've heard of before. And I've had it happen to one of my intended parents, not because my intended parents ghosted the surrogate, but because the surrogate actually ghosted the intended parents. They wanted contact. How did you find closure in that in situations where the relationship ended abruptly?
I think that for one thing, as time passed, it got less and less painful, I guess is the word I would use. And I reframed it because my biggest frustration was that I didn't get the chance to say goodbye. The more that I thought about it, I realized I actually did get to say goodbye. I held the baby for a long time. I gave her first bottle. And so I actually had to ask the hospital staff to take her from me because she fell asleep while I was giving her bottle, which was my favorite thing that my son did. And so I was feeling like a little bit of attachment. And I'm like, oh, I don't want that. Here, take the baby. And they asked me if I wanted to say goodbye before I left. And I said, no, it's fine. The parents are going to call me and I'll say goodbye when they get there. I started remembering that I did get the chance to say goodbye because I gave her her bottle, I held her, I was there with her for at least an hour, and I declined to say goodbye, like, that was all my choice, and, for me, being at choice is a big deal. I just reminded myself where I was at choice, and had I had this crystal ball that told me I wouldn't get to see them again, I might have made a different choice, but I didn't. So I made the choices that I made with the information that I had at the time. At some point, I gave the baby a name, and she was born on one of my close friends' birthdays. So I remember, okay, so she's X number of years now, and give her a little happy birthday in my mind.
I think for intended parents who are listening to what you're sharing, I think it's really special to send your surrogate a card on your child's birthday. I think that goes a long way. Surrogates are extremely special people in our lives. And I think that what they've done for you And for me, it's just so special and should be honored.
A picture on their birthday would be so perfect. But you also brought up a really important perspective that I don't think that I'd even thought about, that they are dealing with a brand new baby and that they're dealing with late nights and all the things that come with parenthood that we weren't expecting. And I work with moms a lot, and I think that we have this biological desire to be moms, but we don't know all that goes into it, or the difficulty of the baby. Like, babies don't sleep sometimes, and that's hard, and so you're not thinking about the person who gave you this baby, you're just thinking about the fact that you haven't slept in
Right.
6 months. So that is a different perspective that I actually never considered.
Do you think that it should be in the contract as far as what happens when the baby's born, that the surrogate gets to hold the baby for a certain amount of time and say goodbye?
That has been in every single one of my contracts, that I get at least an hour of time with the baby to say goodbye, and I've gotten it all but once. And with the twins, I actually spent 2 days in the hospital with them and the mom because there was no place for her to sleep. So she was just in the room with me. I had a C-section with the twins, and I'm like, "Man, I have such a huge respect for moms who have a C-section and then they have to take care of a baby." This is crazy that that happens.
Yeah, you have a big surgery and then someone has you 2 little lives that you have to keep alive. That is a lot.
Right. That's so much. Women are incredible.
Yes, I agree. Looking back at all your journeys, what advice would you give a first-time surrogate?
I think I'll do a shameless plug and say, read my book so you kind of know what to expect along the journey. But, it's not a journey to consider lightly. It is something that is life changing for many people, but including you, it does change you. And so knowing what you want is the biggest piece of advice. And if you really are okay with anything, remind yourself you're okay with anything.
And I wanna get into a little bit of the unfiltered part, and I'm not sure where this is gonna go, but I've had some really ugly experiences with agencies, and we didn't talk about agencies at all this entire interview. Can you talk to me unfiltered about your agency experiences? Because I think surrogates need to hear that too, and intended parents from your perspective, having gone through 4 journeys.
I've had 3 agencies. I could rank them in order of the ones that I like the most. I could also say this agency had a really cool feature, which the first agency had surrogate meetings. And so all the surrogates of the agency came together once a month. And I thought that was awesome. That was so much fun. It was great to connect with other agencies. That the first agency was the only one that did that. And so it was like, oh, that I missed that when I was at other agencies. One thing that I think that nobody ever said in any of the agencies that I worked for is that you should know the quality of the embryo that's being transferred to you, because I was matched with a couple from, I believe, from China, and we did 3 embryo transfers that failed because we did not know the quality of the embryo. The parents didn't want the embryos tested, which I thought was really interesting. So we transferred 3 times and all 3 were failed, even though, and the owner of the agency is, "You did nothing wrong." And then no other doctors would work with me that worked with that agency. And had I known that was a factor that was gonna count against me later, I would have said, "Yeah, I'm not gonna do 2 more embryo transfers without knowing the quality."
Yeah, and what can also happen is this embryo transfer happened to your body. And let's say I tried to get those records, they're not gonna be in your records. I cannot find out the quality of the embryos that were transferred to you because the clinics will say, "Oh, that's someone else's information," which I don't agree with. This is an embryo that, like you said, you should know the quality, and you should ask. And it's on the reports, like the day you do your transfer. So that's something that surrogates should know, especially after the fact, just like you talked about. So I'm glad you brought that up because I think that first time surrogates, they sometimes don't know enough about embryo quality and implantation rates and the difference between tested and untested embryos. So, where can people find you if they'd like to get the book or work with you as a coach?
My website is AlysiaLyons.com. My books are on AlysiaLyons.com/books with an S. Creating Little Miracles is also on Amazon, or you can get it directly from me.
Awesome. Alysia, is there anything else you'd like to add today?
I just want to say that surrogacy is truly one of the most rewarding things that I've done in my life, if not the most rewarding thing besides being a mom. And so I highly recommend it to anybody that doesn't mind being pregnant and doesn't mind having a baby for somebody else. But it's something that takes a big heart, but know that you're doing something good in the world. When I was turning 40, I was freaking out because I felt like I hadn't accomplished my mission in the world to help people and to make an impact, I think was the exact phrase that I made. And my really good friend said, Alysia, you have birthed 6 babies. You're good. You've made your impact. And I was like, okay, I can relax. And that worked. I think it's a really great thing to do to make an impact on the world.
That made me tear up because that's my impact too. Obviously, I'm trying to fill this world with as many loving parents as possible. I want to ask you another question because I think this is something that surrogates sometimes don't realize is that you're a surrogate because it's easy for you to get pregnant and pregnancy is easy. But sometimes transfers don't work. You had embryos that weren't very good quality transferred to you. How did that make you feel as a surrogate? How did you get through that? Because I think surrogates, sometimes I've seen it happen. I have to be there to support them because they get really depressed if a transfer doesn't work because all of a sudden they feel like something's wrong with them. And I have to remind them, no, you're using someone else's DNA. We're working with you because you're our best option. So, how did you navigate the emotions of finding out that a pregnancy test was negative?
It was definitely disappointing, and I take a very spiritual view of it that, like, it's gonna happen when it's supposed to happen, and that everyone is doing everything that they can to make sure that we have a positive pregnancy test, and so it's not all on you. It's not all on the doctor. It's not all on the medication. Like there's so many different factors. Like the stars have to align in order to get pregnant. It's hard to get pregnant naturally. What is it, like 20% chance of getting pregnant naturally?
Yeah. If you're
So
25, yes.
25, yeah, it's not just you, and do what you need to do to comfort yourself through that and to comfort the intended parents, because I know that they're having emotions about it too.
Alicia, well, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate it. I'm really glad you wrote this book, and hopefully, a lot of people, both intended parents and future surrogates, will learn from it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show, for writing the forward and helping me get it out into the world.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for listening and making the Egg Whisperer Show a part of your weekly routine. To find show notes and a full transcript for this episode, visit dramy.org and look under the blog tab. While you're there, you can find a link for the Egg Whisperer newsletter, which keeps you in the know about fertility news. You can also find Dr. Amy and the Egg Whisperer Show on YouTube, Instagram, or Facebook. If you'd like to learn even more, Dr. Amy offers classes at the Egg Whisperer School, eggwhispererschool.com, or you can request a consultation on dramy.org. Thank you so much for tuning in and for sharing the Egg Whisperer Show with others. Keep sparkling and have a great day.